Hello everyone, now we'll discuss the pharmacology of peptic ulcers. So what are peptic ulcers? Peptic ulcers are the areas of degeneration and necrosis of GI mucosa, gastrointestinal mucosa, exposed to acid and peptic secretions. These are the areas of degeneration and necrosis. They occur mostly in the duodenum and stomach in the ratio of 4:1. The ratio of peptic ulcers is 4:1. Especially they occur in the duodenum or in the stomach. Now coming to the classification of peptic ulcers based on their pathophysiology, they are either classified as acute peptic ulcers or chronic peptic ulcers. Acute peptic ulcers are mostly stress induced. So the stress may be due to psychological stress or physiological stress such as trauma, shock, septicemia, drug intake, especially in case of NSAIDs and corticosteroids, and also due to local irritants. These are the factors which might cause the stress induced peptic ulcers. Now coming to chronic peptic ulcers, they are of mainly two types, the gastric ulcers or duodenal ulcers. Now coming to the etiology or causes for peptic ulcers. The causes for peptic ulcers are broadly classified into two types. They are peptic ulcer occurs mainly because of the imbalance between the aggressive and the defensive factors. Our gastrointestinal mucosa, it has aggressive factors and the defensive factors. The aggressive factors, they attack the GI mucosa, whereas the defensive factors, they protect the gastrointestinal tract. So because of the imbalance between the aggressive and the defensive factors, peptic ulcers may occur. Now the examples of aggressive factors are acid, pepsin and bile. Now coming to defensive factors, they are the mucus, bicarbonate ions, prostaglandins and the nitric oxide. These are the defensive factors which aid in the defensive mechanism to protect the GI mucosa. Now the second cause is infection of the gastrointestinal mucosa due to various microorganisms, and in this case we will be discussing specifically about Helicobacter pylori. Infection of gastric mucosa due to Helicobacter pylori, H. pylori. This is the major cause for infective gastritis. Now coming to the regulation of gastric acid. So we all know that our stomach produces HCl and parietal cells are mainly involved in the generation or secretion of hydrochloric acid. Now the secretion of this gastric acid or hydrochloric acid, it is mainly regulated by three factors. They are, the first one is hydrogen potassium ATPase proton pump, and the second is a symport carrier system of potassium and chloride ions, and the third is antipode transport system which exchanges chloride ions and the bicarbonate ions. Symport means in the same direction, that is the transport of ions occurs in the same direction, whereas antipode, the transport of ions occurs in the opposite direction. Now this is the diagrammatic representation of regulation of gastric acid secretion. So we know that although the parietal cells, they secrete hydrogen ions and the chloride ions separately into the stomach lumen. The parietal cell, it separately secretes hydrogen ion and the chloride ion into the stomach lumen. The net effect will be secretion of hydrochloric acid. So as we have discussed in the previous slide, the proton pumps, these are the proton pumps. The proton pumps powered by H plus K plus ATPase, the proton pump covered by H plus K plus ATPase, it actively transports the H plus ion into the lumen, while it brings the potassium ion into the cell. It actively transports the H plus ion into the lumen and it brings the potassium ion into the cell. At the same time, the chloride ions and the potassium ions, Cl minus and the K plus, chloride ions and the potassium ions, they diffuse into the lumen through Cl minus and K plus channels in the apical membrane. The apical membrane also has this potassium ion channel and chloride ion channel. So the chloride ion and the potassium ions, they diffuse out into the lumen through these channels. And one more important point is an enzyme called as carbonic anhydrase. The enzyme carbonic anhydrase, which is especially plentiful in the parietal cells, it catalyzes the formation of carbonic acid H2CO3. This is nothing but carbonic acid from water and carbon dioxide. And as the carbonic acid dissociates, it provides a ready source of hydrogen for the proton pump. As the carbonic acid it dissociates, it provides a great source of H plus ions for the proton pump and also generates bicarbonate ions HCO3 minus. So these are the bicarbonate ions. So as the bicarbonate ion builds up in the cytosol, it exits the parietal cell in exchange of chloride ion via the Cl minus and HCO3 minus antiporters in the basal membrane. So as there is a buildup of bicarbonate ion, it is exported out of the cell with the help of chloride bicarbonate antiport system. And one more important point is this alkaline tide of bicarbonate ions entering into the bloodstream after a meal may be large enough to elevate the blood pH slightly and make the urine more alkaline. So because of this alkaline tide after a meal, the urine becomes slightly more alkaline. So this is the overall regulation of gastric acid secretion by a parietal cell. Now coming to the principal mediators. So the mediators which control the parietal cell acid output. There are certain mediators which control the parietal cell acid output. They may either have a stimulatory effect or an inhibitory effect. The mediators can have stimulatory effect which enhance the release of acid, or they may have an inhibitory effect which decrease the release of acid. Now coming to the stimulatory effect, mediators such as histamine, gastrin and acetylcholine, they have a stimulatory effect on the gastric acid production. That is nothing but they increase the secretion of HCl. When it comes to inhibitory effect, principal mediators such as prostaglandins and somatostatin, these two, they decrease the acid secretions. Histamine is a local hormone, whereas gastrin is a peptide hormone, and as we all know, acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter. When it comes to prostaglandins, E2 and I2, they play a major role. They are the local hormones, and even somatostatin is a peptide hormone. So prostaglandins and somatostatins, they have an inhibitory effect, whereas histamine, gastrin and acetylcholine, they have a stimulatory effect. As we have discussed previously, hydrochloric acid is secreted in abundance by parietal cells, and one of the principal stimuli for secretion of acid by parietal cells is histamine. So histamine is secreted from the neighboring enterochromaffin cells, and this histamine receptor on the parietal cells is H2 type. This is also important point. So the histamine receptor on the parietal cells is H2 type, and blocking of the binding of histamine to this receptor is widely used method for suppressing gastric acid secretions. Now coming to the overall mechanism, as we have discussed previously, the somatostatin and prostaglandins. Somatostatin, it exerts an inhibitory effect on the G cell, parietal cell and enterochromaffin-like cells. ECL means enterochromaffin-like cells, whereas the prostaglandins, they exert an inhibitory effect on ECL cells. Now, how acetylcholine is going to affect or provoke the acidic secretion means, because of the vagal stimuli, there is a release of acetylcholine, and this acetylcholine, it acts on the muscarinic receptors on the parietal cell, and these muscarinic receptors in turn increase the gastric acid secretions. And similar mechanism is similar, but another different mechanism is through gastrin. The G cells, they synthesize gastrin, and once the gastrin is secreted in the blood, it acts on the cholecystokinin receptors, CCK2 receptors on the enterochromaffin-like cells, or it has a direct effect on the parietal cells. So gastrin might act on CCK2 receptor cells, or it can directly act on the parietal cells. So the net effect is it aids in the release of histamine, and this histamine, it acts on the parietal cell H2 receptor to elevate the cyclic AMP, and this in turn results in the active acid secretion by proton pump. Now this is the overall diagrammatic representation. As we all know, the G cells, they secrete gastrin, and this gastrin, it can directly act on CCK2 receptor, or it can act directly on the parietal cell. Now H2 blockers. H2 blockers are the major drugs which are used in the peptic ulcers. They mainly block the H2 receptors, and they mainly block the binding of histamine to this H2 receptors. Therefore, they reduce the gastric acid secretions. And similarly, we have misoprostol, which is a prostaglandin analog. It acts on the prostaglandin receptor. And similarly, we have proton pump inhibitors, which inhibit the proton pump, thereby decrease the acid secretion. And similarly, we have muscarinic antagonist, which block muscarinic receptors. Example is atropine, and they decrease the acid secretion. Similarly, somatostatin analogs, they also bind to SST2 receptors and produce the desired effect. Now coming to the classification of drugs. The drugs used for peptic ulcer are broadly classified into 4 types. They are gastric acid secretion inhibitors. Next one is anti-H. pylori drugs. Next is ulcer protective drugs, and the next is gastric acid secretion neutralizers. Acid secretion inhibitors and acid secretion neutralizers. Gastric acid secretion neutralizers are nothing but antacids. They are again classified into systemic antacids and non-systemic antacids. And when it comes to gastric acid secretion inhibitors, they are H2 receptor blockers or H2 antihistamines, proton pump inhibitors, anticholinergic drugs, and PG analogs, prostaglandin analogs. These are the 4 class of drugs which act as gastric acid secretion inhibitors. Now coming to gastric acid secretion inhibitors. The first class of drugs are H2 blockers. The examples are cimetidine, ranitidine and famotidine. So all H2 blockers are competitive antagonists except for famotidine. Famotidine is a non-competitive antagonist. This is an important point because it strongly binds to H2 receptors. Famotidine, it strongly binds to H2 receptors, and the mechanism of action is they inhibit the histamine gastrin stimulated acid secretions. This leads to reduction in the volume of gastric juice, and even the pepsin secretion also falls. And one more important point is the inhibition is dose dependent. In case of H2 blockers, the inhibition is dose dependent, and majorly the bioavailability of drugs is 60 to 70%. And when it comes to potency, ranitidine is more potent and it is given less frequently in smaller doses, whereas cimetidine is more efficacious. Coming to the uses, they are mainly used for peptic ulcer, GERD and stress-induced ulcers. When it comes to side effects, they are diarrhea, dizziness, muscle pain, confusions. And cimetidine alone has specific side effects. They are anti-androgenic drug effects. Cimetidine is an anti-androgenic drug. It can cause gynecomastia, impotence in male and galacturia in females. And one more important point is it inhibits P450 isoenzyme, cytochrome P450 isoenzyme. Therefore, it retards the metabolism of those drugs which are primarily metabolized by cytochrome P450. Coming to next class, they are proton pump inhibitors. The examples are omeprazole, esomeprazole, lanoprazole and pantoprazole. These are majorly used drugs. So coming to omeprazole, it is a prototype proton pump inhibitor and it inhibits the final common step in gastric acid secretions. So it inhibits proton pump. Coming to the uses, it is mainly proton pump inhibitors are primarily used in peptic ulcers, GERD, stress ulcers and Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, in case of NSAIDs induced ulcers and also in case of anti-H. pylori therapy. Proton pump inhibitors are used in anti-H. pylori therapy also. Coming to the side effects, they are dizziness, nausea, abdominal pain, muscle pain, diarrhea, impotence, confusion and gynecomastia. And there is also a risk in liver disease and pregnancy. So coming to the overall mechanism of action for proton pump inhibitors, they are dose dependent suppression of gastric acid secretion is seen. In case of proton pump inhibitors, dose dependent suppression is seen without blocking any receptors because they act on the proton pump. They completely abolish the HCl secretion. So, and usually the drugs are weak bases and inactive in neutral pH. But at pH less than 5, and that is in case of acidic pH, they rearrange to two cationic forms, that is sulfonic acid and sulfonamide. And these two cationic forms, they covalently bind with potassium H plus ATPase pump and inactivate it irreversibly. Because of this covalent bond, they bind with potassium H plus ATPase pump. This pump will get inactive irreversibly. That is the reason they will completely abolish the HCl secretion. This is the overall mechanism of action of proton pump inhibitors. Now coming to the next class, that is prostaglandin analogues. The major drug is misoprostol. It is a synthetic PGE1 derivative. So as we all know, PGE2 and PGI2 are produced in gastric mucosa, and usually the natural prostaglandins, they have a shorter T half. they mainly act as cytoprotective agents. That is, they reduce the histamine stimulated acid secretion, they promote the mucus and bicarbonate ion secretion, and they also inhibit gastrin secretion, and they increase the mucus blood flow. By these three actions, the prostaglandin analogues, that is misoprostol, it shows its cytoprotective action. And coming to the uses, they are primarily used in NSAID associated gastric injury and even blood loss. They are very poor in relieving the ulcer pain, and usually whenever the prostaglandin analogues are administered along with food or antacids, the absorption and bioavailability of prostaglandins is reduced. So they should not be taken along with food and antacids. Coming to the side effects, they are diarrhea, abdominal and uterine cramps. Uterine cramps, when it comes to uterine cramps, this prostaglandin analog, it has a stimulant effect in uterine contractions. That is the reason why we get uterine cramps. Coming to next drug, they are anticholinergics. The major drugs are atropine and pyrazapine. So these are selective M1 anticholinergics, and not anticholinergics are not used anymore in the peptic ulcer because of their limited effect on the ACH on inducing gastric acid secretion. Coming to the side effects of anticholinergics, they are dry mouth, blurred vision, constipation, difficulty in micturition especially in men, and exacerbation of glaucoma. Anticholinergics are not frequently used to treat peptic ulcers. This is an important point. Now the next drugs are gastric acid secretion neutralizers. They are nothing but antacids. We are very familiar with the term antacids. They are nothing but gastric acid secretion neutralizers. So whenever an antacid is taken, the antacid reacts with acid in the stomach and it causes neutralization of the acid. Hence they are called as acid secretion neutralizers. So, and now coming to antacids, they are mainly inorganic salts. They chemically react with the gastric HCl, forming neutral compounds. They also decrease the pepsin activity. When it comes to uses, majorly antacids are not used in peptic ulcer because large and frequent doses are required. They are used to provide pain relief. They are used in indigestion, that is nothing but dyspepsia, and also to treat acidity. And they are also employed in GERD. Coming to the classification of antacids, they are classified into two types, systemic antacids and non-systemic antacids. Examples of systemic antacids are sodium bicarbonate NaHCO3 and sodium citrate. When it comes to non-systemic antacids, they are NaHCO3, magnesium hydroxide, magnesium trisilicate, alginates, aluminium hydroxide and calcium carbonate. These are the examples of non-systemic antacids. So, coming to systemic antacids, they are water soluble, they act instantaneously and have a shorter duration of action. Coming to the uses, the systemic antacids, they quickly provide symptomatic relief. Systemic antacids, they quickly provide the symptomatic relief. They are also used to alkalinize the urine. In certain cases, there is a necessity to increase the alkalinity of urine. In such cases, systemic antacids are employed. And they are also used to treat acidosis. Now coming to the side effects, they are absorbed systematically. That is, large doses cause systemic acidosis. as they are absorbed, they are water soluble, and as they are systemic antacids, large dose of these drugs causes systemic alkalosis, and as a result acid rebound may occur. Acid rebound is also a side effect, and similarly increased sodium concentrations are seen, which leads to fluid retention. Especially the fluid retention may worsen in case of edema and congestive heart failure. Because of the increased sodium concentration, the fluid retention may worsen in case of edema and congestive heart failure. This is also a side effect. And the next side effect is they produce carbon dioxide in the stomach, and this leads to gastric distension, belching, and risk of ulcer perforation. Because they produce carbon dioxide in the stomach, this can lead to gastric distension, belching, and risk of ulcer perforation. And because of this risk of ulcer perforation, antacids are not used to treat peptic ulcers. Now coming to the non-systemic antacids. They are insoluble and poorly absorbed, and they mainly react to form chloride salt. The majorly used drugs are AlOH3, aluminium hydroxide, and aluminium hydroxide is a slow acting, and when it is taken along with food, it decreases the neutralizing capacity. Coming to the unwanted effects, the aluminium ion, it relaxes the smooth muscle, which causes delayed gastric emptying and lead to constipation. This is an unwanted side effect of aluminium hydroxide. The next drug is magnesium hydroxide. It is quick and it shows prolonged action. But the side effect is magnesium hydroxide, it acts as osmotic purgative, and due to that reason it can lead to diarrhea. And the aqueous suspension of magnesium hydroxide is called as milk of magnesia. The next drug is calcium carbonate. It is potent and rapidly acting, but the side effect is it produces carbon dioxide in the stomach, which leads to gastric distension. Coming to the side effects, milk alkali syndrome and acid rebound are the overall side effects of non-systemic antacids. So as we have discussed previously, individual drugs, they have specific side effects. For that reason, antacid combinations are seen. Non-systemic antacids are always given in combination. So the combination are magnesium salts along with aluminium salts. So when we discuss about the combination, this is the combined effect. So as we know that magnesium salts are fast acting, whereas aluminium salts are slow acting. So whenever given in combination, they produce a sustained effect. And similarly, magnesium salts, they have laxative effect, whereas aluminium salts, they have constipating effect. So whenever taken in combination, the bowel movement is least affected, which is a desired effect. And similarly, gastric emptying is hastened or increased when we take magnesium salts, whereas gastric emptying is delayed when we take aluminium salts. So whenever we take in combination, the gastric emptying is least affected, which is also a desired effect. And similarly, dose of individual components are reduced. So because they are taken in combination, the dose is reduced. So the effect is systemic toxicity is minimized. Hence, antacid combinations are more effective when compared to individual drugs, and majorly combinations are only employed. Coming to the drug interactions, as the antacids, they act by raising the gastric pH and form complexes. This may reduce the absorption of many drugs such as tetracyclines, iron, and fluoroquinolones. Now coming to ulcer protective agents, the drug is sucralfate. So sucralfate in acidic medium, it polymerizes and forms a sticky gel, and this gel, it adheres to the ulcer base, it forms a chemical barrier and prevents the contact with acid, pepsin and bile. Hence it is called as ulcer protective. And similarly, sucralfate also it increases the Pg synthesis in the gastric mucosa. It has no acid neutralizing capacity, but it delays gastric emptying. And one more important point is sucralfate needs acidic medium. Hence, it should not be taken along with antacids. And coming to the side effects, it shows constipation, nausea and vomiting and back pain. And similarly, it shows drug interactions with tetracyclines and digoxin. When it comes to uses, sucralfate is mainly used to treat reflux, acid reflux, gastritis and stress ulcers. And one more important point is, as it forms a chemical barrier, it promotes in the healing. Sucralfate, it promotes in the healing of duodenal and gastric ulcers. Coming to the next drug, that is colloidal bismuth subcitrate. The mechanism of action of colloidal bismuth subcitrate, CBS, is not known and it can show various effects. The first is, it may increase the gastric mucosal prostaglandin E2 synthesis. So because of which it in turn leads to mucus and bicarbonate ion production. The other mechanism is, it precipitates the mucus glycoproteins, which the effect is they may coat the ulcer base. And the next is, in case of H. pylori, it may detach an H. pylori directly. Coming to the properties, the colloidal bismuth subcitrate is water soluble, but it precipitates at pH less than 5. When it comes to side effects, diarrhea, headache, dizziness and blackening of stools and darkening of tongue are the side effects. So blackening of stools and darkening of tongue are specific side effects for colloidal bismuth subcitrate. Coming to uses, CBS is used in gastritis, non-ulcer dyspepsia associated with H. pylori, and it is used as a component of triple drug in anti-H. pylori regimen. Because it may directly detach and inhibit the H. pylori, it is used in H. pylori therapy. Now finally coming to the anti-Helicobacter pylori drugs. H. pylori, when it comes to H. pylori, it is a gram-negative bacteria and it survives in the stomach, attaches to the surface epithelium and it possesses a high urease activity. This gram-negative bacteria, it possesses a high urease activity. As a result, it produces ammonia. This bacteria produces ammonia and it creates a neutral environment around itself by producing ammonia. Because ammonia is a base, it neutralizes the acid and it creates a neutral environment around itself in order to survive. So the major antimicrobials used in H. pylori therapy are amoxicillin, clarithromycin, tetracycline, metronidazole and tinidazole. One more important point is, resistance develops rapidly, hence combinations are used. So fast activity is seen when it is used along with proton pump inhibitors. Majority of the drugs, they are used along with these antimicrobials, they are used along with proton pump inhibitors, because the proton pump inhibitors, they completely abolish the acidic environment. So this can directly inhibit the H. pylori. Now coming to the overall drugs, the majorly used antimicrobials are amoxicillin. First one is amoxicillin. Amoxicillin is a beta-lactam antimicrobial. So it exerts a bactericidal activity via the inhibition of cell wall synthesis. Amoxicillin inhibits the bacterial cell wall synthesis by binding to penicillin binding proteins. The next drug is clarithromycin. Clarithromycin is a semi-synthetic macrolide antibiotic. It is derived from erythromycin. It inhibits the protein synthesis by binding to bacterial 50S ribosomal subunit. So amoxicillin inhibits cell wall synthesis, whereas clarithromycin it inhibits the protein synthesis. When it comes to tetracyclines, they also inhibit protein synthesis. The mechanism is by reversibly binding to the receptors on 30S ribosomal subunit. Clarithromycin it acts on 50S ribosomal subunit, whereas tetracycline it acts on 30S ribosomal subunit. The next drug are metronidazole and tinidazole. These drugs they produce free radicals, nitro radicals, which are generated by the metabolism of these drugs. Metronidazole and tinidazole, when they undergo metabolism, they produce nitrogen radicals, and this may inhibit the protein synthesis by interacting with DNA and causing the loss of helical DNA structure and strand breakage. Even the mechanism of action for metronidazole and tinidazole is not very clear. They may act through this mechanism by the production of nitro radicals. So these are the overall antimicrobials which are employed, majorly used in H. pylori therapy. Now triple drug and quadruple drug. So as we have discussed, lansoprazole, the proton pump inhibitors are used in combination with antimicrobials. So in case of triple drug, lansoprazole is used, 30 mg of lansoprazole plus amoxicillin 1000 mg and clarithromycin 500 mg. This is a triple drug which is used in H. pylori therapy. Even quadruple, that is a combination of 4 drugs are also used. In this case, bismuth CBS, colloidal bismuth subcitrate is used in case of quadruple drug. So CBS 120 mg plus metronidazole 400 mg plus tetracycline 500 mg plus again here proton pump inhibitor omeprazole 20 mg. So this is also very effective in H. pylori therapy. And as we know that any proton pump inhibitor plus amoxicillin plus clarithromycin plus metronidazole combination is also used in H. pylori therapy. By this we complete the pharmacology of peptic ulcers along with H. pylori drugs, anti-H. pylori drugs. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for further videos on pharmacology.